How's everyone doing? Really? Is that it? Come on, this is the first xda-DevCon. How's everyone doing? That's more like it. So, hey everyone, my name is Jono Bacon. I work at Canonical as the Ubuntu Community Manager, and today I'm going to be talking about Ubuntu and our Convergent vision. So first of all, how many of you are familiar with Ubuntu, what it is? Okay, brilliant. That's good to know. That is really good to know. So, just first of all, who I am. I work, like I say, I work by day as the Ubuntu Community Manager. I do some consultancy around community management on the side. But I'm really interested in community management and leadership. I believe that community growth is one of the most beautiful things that we can do as people. Is when we get together and we form a community, we can do things that are greater than the capabilities of the individuals. XDA is such a beautiful example of that. So I've been really interested in furthering the art and science of community management. So I wrote a book called The Art of Community, which I don't mind pimping because you can buy it, but you can also go and download it from the website as well. So I'd recommend you check that out. And then I also organize a conference every year called the Community Leadership Summit. Now, some of you are probably Linux users, and may have seen this in the past. Blah, blah, blah is going to be the year of the Linux desktop. I've been hearing this for donkey's years. I remember people saying that, like, I think it was Linux, what was it? 2004 was going to be the year of the Linux desktop. Did anyone use Linux in 2004? Yeah. It was pretty horrendous. It was pretty much raw material. And we've been promised this thing over and over and again, but when we talk about the year being the year of the Linux desktop, what we're really talking about is this thing, the chasm. It's this notion of being able to go from something that enthusiasts are interested in to something that the general populace is going to be interested in as well. Now, we've been focusing on this a lot over the years with Ubuntu, and right now we've built this Convergence story, which is a single ubiquitous operating system that runs on phones and tablets and desktops and televisions, and possibly toasters and fridges and whatever else you can think of. But I wanted to talk about how we've got to this point, and then what we're doing about the phone specifically that may interest you first. I started at Canonical about 7 years ago, and I looked like this. I had hair, believe it or not. And then, it's weird, when I was about 28, my hair started growing inwards and coming out my toes. So I just pretty much had to shave it up. But back then, we were really targeting these things, these big beige boxes. I kind of miss these days. I miss kind of cracking them open and switching out graphics cards and whatever else. Well, mine had one of these next to it as well. But we were very, very focused back in those days, back in sort of 2004, 2005, on desktops on the beige boxes. And it looked pretty much like this. It was basically upstream components, in our case GNOME, and we'd pull it in, and we'd integrate it to the system. And a lot of people talk about integration like it's a pretty simple thing, but it's actually a huge amount of work to integrate other people's code into a consistent system. But we spent time doing this, and everything was going pretty well. We also focused on the server as well. I'm going to obviously talk about the server a little bit less today, because we're all client people, essentially. Canonical back then was way smaller as well. Canonical is the commercial stakeholder of Ubuntu. We basically hire a team of people all over the world who work on building out Ubuntu and all the different aspects of the platform. Back then, Canonical was about this big. Pretty small company. Most of us work from home. You probably can't see it, that's me. The guy next to me here, this guy is called Ben Collins, who introduced me to the Jaeger bomb. If you ever bump into this guy in a bar, because he works on like PowerPC stuff these days, and he says, fancy a drink? I recommend you say no, because you're in for some pain. And then there's this guy, Mark Shuttleworth is the founder of the Ubuntu project, multi-millionaire, went into space, first South African in space, and he's as rigorously passionate about Ubuntu today as he's ever been. So the community back then started growing, and my job as a community manager was to kind of build it out and to get people working on different aspects of Ubuntu. And we have people who work on local user groups. Got some guys down here who are doing exactly that. People who work on development and translations. And one of the things that we really wanted to do with Ubuntu was to make our community a place where you could join and participate, and it didn't require you to have a neckbeard. We wanted this to be a place where people could participate at a deep technical level, as well as people who could participate around the edges, around support and translations and documentation and other pieces. And that was quite a change for a lot of Linux communities. Back in 2004, Linux was very, very technically focused. So I'm really proud that our community has kind of expanded in that way. So as time went on, our desktop started developing. We started developing more of an identity. We started theming a little bit more. It started looking a little bit more like us. And what I mean by us, I mean it was brown. We had, I don't know why we had a thing for brown back in the day. But we got to a point where we were essentially saying, you know, we have this chasm to get over. Now, some of you may be unfamiliar with the concept of the chasm, so let me just explain this for a second. This is a graph that basically shows technology adoption. And usually right at the beginning, when new technology comes out, we get the innovators, people who innovated with different types of technology, and there's quite a small number of those people in the world. The innovators usually create something, and then the early adopters start getting involved. And everyone in this room is an early adopter. Anyone who goes to a technology conference is basically can be pretty much considered an early adopter. So a lot of people start using the technology. And then you have this gap called the chasm, which is the gap between early adopters and the early majority. So the early majority are often kind of end users who like to watch TV shows about technology, but don't necessarily go to conferences. And that chasm, while it seems quite narrow, is impossibly difficult to get over. This has been something that over the years, many technology companies have fallen down that chasm into a crushing pit of despair. And the reason for that is because having great technology is not enough. It's not just about having a great product or having great code. It's about having something that people want, that you can sell, that you can maintain, that you can build a business around, that you can build a community around, whatever else. So we were at this point in sort of 2007, 2008, where we've basically done as much as we could with the early adopters. Then Ubuntu was the choice of Linux enthusiasts on the desktop, and it was the choice of Linux enthusiasts on the server. So we wanted to get over the chasm, but that wasn't just about making a better Linux distribution, because in 2008, Linux desktop shipments were strong. It's not like it is today where they're gradually going down. We knew that we had to do something different to help us propel Ubuntu and free software into a wider realm. So we basically sat down and said, look, we need to challenge ourselves. You know, we need to sit down and look at what we're doing and identify what we can do to get over that chasm. And this is when we really started thinking about this notion of convergence, this notion of, could we build Ubuntu and really go after all of these different platforms and these different form factors? Because back then, and I think this is a subtlety, is Ubuntu was very much a project. And what I mean by that is, it was a comment in which things came into it, but there wasn't necessarily as much synchronicity in those different pieces in the common. So we had, you know, we pull all these upstream components in, and we tried to integrate it as best we could. But we were fundamentally leaving the direction and the focus of Ubuntu to those upstreams. So we weren't really, as an Ubuntu project, we weren't really necessarily building a direction. What we were doing was we were respecting the direction of upstream. And what that meant is that Ubuntu felt like kind of, it was there to fit lots of different purposes, and it didn't really have as much of an identity, as much of a definitive direction. So what we started thinking about is, we really need to turn this into a product. We want to have the foundation of our community, the foundation of our commons, the foundation of it being a project, but we need to build something that is considered a product that people can ship, that people can put on their devices. And our philosophy is a fundamental piece of what we do. As I say, I've been at Canonical now for coming up to 7 years, and I'll never forget, I interviewed with Mark Shuttleworth in his kitchen. He's the founder of the company. And one thing he made very clear in my job interview was, our community is the rock on which Ubuntu is built. And nearly 7 years on, I saw him last week, and he made a very similar statement. You know, our community is the rock on which we're built. That hasn't changed. That philosophy hasn't changed. We have a set of very clear values in Ubuntu. It will always be free. We will not have a special enterprise version that's got all the good stuff in and a crippled community version. It will be available in your language. It will be available for people with abilities or disabilities. These are the core values that we've had in Ubuntu. And even though we needed to make that transition to get over that chasm, we knew that our philosophy had to be the foundation on which we took that forward. So we started focusing on the desktop, and we started thinking about ways in which we could build a more cohesive experience. And back then, this is when the idea of Convergent started settling in. We knew that we wanted to build all these different components on the desktop and to improve and refine it. But we wanted to do this in a manner that would span across these additional form factors. So we started hiring a design team. And how many of you work with the designers? Yeah? So you will all know what I'm talking about when I say this, is that there is quite a cultural difference between designers and developers. And we brought these, this bunch of designers in who all wear scarves and everything, and are ironic. And it was a little culture shock because Canonical back then had very much of an engineering-focused company. That's what we did. Everyone who came into it came from an engineering background. So it took some time to really understand and to connect those different pieces together. It actually took a few years to get it right. But designers came in and they started building out these design assets and these design patterns that could span across these different devices. And for the design team, it was a really juicy challenge. How can you create a user interface that can work, where the same design patterns can work across all of these different devices, and not have the tablet just be a bigger version of the phone. It's something that can run independently across all these devices. So a lot of these pieces started landing in the desktop, and this was at times a controversial move. Some people in our community were not especially pleased with some of these changes. But one of the things I'm proud about Ubuntu is that we're not afraid to make risky moves. We're not afraid to make bold decisions if we need to, even though it can be quite contentious at times. So we really started focusing on the desktop, and we started shipping these pieces. And this started being noticed by the OEMs. The OEMs were getting very interested in this because Ubuntu was not just developing a visual design, but it was developing a set of design patterns that were telling the story for the future. We then announced at one of our developer summits this convergence idea, and we started sharing with our community like just opening up the discussion around televisions and phones and tablets. And the first piece that really formed from this was the TV. So anyone who's used an Ubuntu desktop who sees the Ubuntu TV will be able to instantly recognize the similarities between the two. The launch, the scope, the different pieces. I'm going to talk more about that soon. But this came out, and it was at this point where we'd had a lot of controversy around this notion of these changes we were making. When we announced the TV, people started getting the idea that things could maybe work consistently across these different devices. We then announced Ubuntu for Android. This is where you can take an Android phone and you can dock it, and it boots a full Ubuntu desktop. So it runs, basically runs from the phone in your pocket. Phenomenal piece of engineering, and a lot of people thought that the impressive piece here was having the phone boot a desktop, and it really wasn't. The most impressive piece here in my mind was having these 60,000 packages in the Ubuntu archive be built to run on the phone. And we did that work with an organization called Monaro. And we demoed this at CES some years back, and it lit the industry up. But what was interesting is that, as a lot of you will know, handset manufacturers are quite slow moving. So while we had the technology that was available, in many cases the hardware wasn't really available. So this is actually a couple of years ahead of its time, but this is the foundation of Ubuntu Edge, which I'm going to talk about a little bit as well. And then on January the 2nd, we announced this, Ubuntu for Phones. A ton of you today have come over to the Ubuntu booth with me demoing these. And I'm going to talk more about this particularly today. But since January the 2nd, no one's slept, basically. It's just been just a constant crazy train of interest and excitement around this. Not just building the phone implementation of Ubuntu, but all the different pieces that go around, which I'll get to. Shortly after the phone, we also announced the tablet. And one important piece here is that the convergence that we're building is not just at the user interface level. It's not just a set of design patterns that match and work across all of these devices. The whole idea is that the actual OS is converged as well. So the desktop UI, the desktop UI, the phone UI, the tablet UI, it's all the same code base. If you run that code base on a desktop and you resize the window to be the size of the phone, you see the phone. If you resize it bigger, you see the tablet. If you resize it bigger, you see the desktop. So it's not just convergence at a feature and a UI level, it's full convergence at an OS level as well, which means that if you can enable it for a piece of hardware, you can run it on almost any piece of hardware. And the bit that connects this, a lot of people ask at CES, so, okay, I have my phone, my Ubuntu phone, I have my Ubuntu tablet. How do I share content? How do you sync it? And we believe that's what the cloud's for. So we have a service called Ubuntu One, which is our personal cloud. So if you buy a song on your Ubuntu phone, as an example, or you download a song, it will automatically sync it to all of your other Ubuntu devices. And there's also clients for Android and for iOS as well. So this is the piece, this is the bucket in which all of your content lives, and that integrates into every aspect of how Ubuntu functions. Now, you know, there is this whole extra story around cloud, but as I said, I'm not really going to dig into this, but Canonical is almost two companies. There's a big cloud orchestration piece, which is around cloud deployments. We have this tool called Juju, which is making it easy to deploy services to the cloud, which will be of interest, particularly for those of you who are building services. So if you're a DevOps, you should check it out. But then there's the whole client side, which is what I'm talking about today. So I'm going to neatly skip over this because I can see everybody's eyes are already starting to glaze over when I talk about the cloud. So anyway, we're here, xda-DevCon, which just, while this slide is up, I just want to say a huge thank you to all of the organizers because they are absolutely rocking this for a first event. I've organized events as part of my work, and organizing, for those of you who've not organized an event before, it's incredibly nerve-wracking, particularly the day before. There's a lot of puckering going on, hoping that people can get here, that there's not going to be a rail strike or whatever. So they've just done a phenomenal job. It's such a nice hotel, despite the elevators. So you're all interested in this more than anything. So we don't have any audio coming out of my laptop, so there's a little bit of audio. I'm going to show you a quick video that has just a 1-minute video overview of the Ubuntu phone. I'm going to put my microphone against the speaker, but I don't think you're going to hear it, so we'll see how this works. So that gives you a bit of an idea of how the phone looks. But I'm going to go through and talk a little bit of how the actual user interface works, and I'm going to talk about some of the technology behind it, and particularly about how we've been working with the XDA community and how the communities, we're trying to make it easier for XDA folks to get involved in the project. So the first thing is that when you switch the phone on, when you power it on, we want it to be attractive and personal at first glance. So instead of just seeing a lock screen, when you switch the Ubuntu phone on, you see this circular thing that we call the infographic. And this is something that apps can talk to. So, for example, if you've got a Fitbit, you could say how many steps you've walked, or it tells you how many photos you've taken that day. It might say how many direct messages on Twitter you've got. So it provides essentially information about you. So, you know, we've all done this where you're out in the bar with your friends, and you just want to check to see if you've got any text messages or anything like that. This is a really neat way in which all that information can be aggregated into one place. And this is unique to each individual person. One of the key things that we've been focusing on is the user interface model. We were intimately aware in designing the phone that handset manufacturers want to keep the bill of materials as low as possible. So the Ubuntu phone doesn't require any buttons, any hardware buttons, other than a power button. Everything else can be controlled by the edges of the screen. And this is where we have the consistency of design patterns across all these different devices. And I'm going to go through and explain how these edges work. You don't even need to have volume buttons. I mean, you can conceivably have them if you want to have them. But really, all you need is the ability to be able to power on and off the screen. So each of these different devices, each of the edges has a specific function. So for example, we have the launcher on the left-hand side that works across all of the different devices. But there is a little bit of variance. So for example, on the phone, if you swipe out from the right edge, you can multitask. But if you do it on the tablet, you have something called the side stage that comes out, which means that you can run a phone app and a tablet app at the same time. So you might be looking at the tablet web browser, and then you might want to swipe out the side stage with your note-taking app, and you might want to drag content from the web browser into the note-taking app, as an example. This is one of the subtle differences between the different devices. So let me explain how each of these edges work. So when you switch it on, if you slide out from the left, you see this thing called the launcher, and this is basically where your favorite applications live. So most of us tend to use a similar set of applications on our devices or on our computers. You could put them in there. This is also where applications that are loading, or that are running rather, will be available. And it's important to stress that this is not just applications that are native to the phone. One of the key areas in which we focus with Ubuntu is that web applications should be first-class citizens. So many of us use Gmail and Google Calendar and things like that, Pandora, Spotify, and we want to make sure that those web services are integrated into the phone as well, or integrated into the desktop as well. So for example, if you load Google Calendar on Ubuntu desktop, it'll have its own icon, it'll appear in the launcher, you can alt-tab between it, it integrates with other pieces of the system, such as the calendar and the parts. So those web applications can be integrated really neatly, so they're not trapped inside that browser tab. So that's the left edge of the screen. The right edge of the screen is for multitasking. So we looked at how people use multiple applications on other devices, and one of the pieces of feedback that we got from the design team was, through user testing, was most people who use Android and iOS phones just don't know how to multitask. They just keep loading applications one by one. They rarely flip between them because the implementation of multitasking was really hard. And with Android, it varies massively between different handsets. So we thought this is where we should dedicate an edge. So if you slide out from the right on the phone, then it will just flip between your applications. Simple as that. Just flip with your thumb. So left edge is the launcher, right edge is for multitasking. The bottom edge is where we wanted to essentially put menu items. One of the things that we found was, one of the core goals with Ubuntu, and I'm going to talk about this in a second, is that content should be key. We want to reduce all the clutter and crap that is in interfaces that we see all the time. And we found that most people who are using applications from our user testing want to use features and functions that are context sensitive. So if you've got a gallery app open, if you're looking at a picture, for example, you can slide out from the bottom edge of the screen and you will see functions that are relevant to the context that you're in at the time. We also have a function called the HUD, which is where you can slide up on the phone and tap an icon, and this provides a means in which you can essentially search through all of the functionality in the application, either by voice or by typing. And again, this applies to all of the different devices. So on the desktop, you tap tab, and then you can search for a particular function that's exposed by a menu, and you can access it really quickly. So the idea is that search is a fundamental piece of how we do things. But that bottom edge is for functionality that's relevant to the context that you're in. The other thing that we found is that when people configure their phones, typically that's a pretty bulky experience, in the sense of you'll be using an application, you want to go and change something on your phone, so you have to break out the app, go to the settings application, choose the right category in that settings app. And I don't know about you, but I always choose the wrong one. So you choose the wrong one, go back, choose the right one, select your item, configure it, and then go back to your application. And that is just so, it seems so inefficient. So we identified that most people want to change a fairly consistent set of things. They want to change volume, brightness, you want to be able to look at your most recently used messages, configure Bluetooth headsets, look at your time, configure the time, things like that. So by swiping down from the top edge of the screen, we have these indicators, these little icons at the top, and you can slide left to right and select the indicator that you want and configure it there. So for example, joining a network, a wireless network, is as easy as slide down to the top of the screen, selecting the network, and then you're good to go. You don't have to break out of the app. It just overlays over the top. So those are basically how the edges work. Left is for the most used applications, bottom is for functionality within an app, right is for multitasking, and then the top is for your indicators. As I mentioned, content is key, and we focused on this from day one. This has actually been a subtle thing that I don't think a lot of people have picked up on the desktop side, is that we want to get as much of the Chrome in an application out of the way. Even to the point where we built functionality to change scroll bars. So scroll bars are just a couple of pixels wide, and when you hover over it, a thumb appears. Because our view is for every pixel that is used by Chrome in an application, it's a wasted pixel. Because it just sits there, you don't use it. So we want to make sure that, particularly on small form factor devices like phones and tablets, that we can use as much of that space as possible as useful. So here's a good example. This is the Gallery app. It's very organic looking. This is a native application that runs on Ubuntu. And this is actually inaccurate because the toolbar icons at the top, the indicators, that actually disappears with this as well, so we can save that space. So what happened is, on the 2nd of January, we announced this, and about a week later we flew out to CES in Las Vegas. Anyone been to CES? That guy. He was the and that guy. You should go. It's just weird. It really is. It's just so insanely big. And the fact that it's in Vegas doesn't help. But we announced it at CES, and I've never seen a reaction to anything we've done like I saw at CES. I was telling a bunch of journalists this. Just the sheer level of interest was just phenomenal. And one of the key questions a lot of people asked was, like, do you guys really think you could be successful? This market is so entrenched by Google and Apple. And our view is, you know what? Just look 5 years ago at what the cell phone industry looked like. Nokia, remember Nokia? You know, like Nokia and Palm and BlackBerry were a big deal back then. Like there was such a different industry back then. And our view is that there is no reason why that industry can't turn around. So technology never ever stands still at any one time. But we went out there, we had a tremendous amount of interest, it was fantastic. And what excited me is that as soon as that was out there, we could start the community growth. So one of the things that we did when we kicked off is we said to our community, like, we need help with this. Like, we've always done this together as a community. We work together to grow different aspects of how we work in Ubuntu. So we invited our community to write the 12 core applications that we need for the phone: calendar, clock, a calculator, things like that. We had 1,500 QML developers registered to help us with the phone, of which we creamed up about 200 or 300 of those, the very best people. In some cases, there were some people who had enthusiasm but not necessarily skills, who were interested in helping. We brought them into the fold. We got people involved in continuous integration and automated testing and translations. And our advocates went out spreading the word about it and all the rest of it. And we got involved with XDA, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later. But Ubuntu Phone is a fully community open, it's a fully open and community-driven project. So we have all of our code is available, all of our bugs are public. You can go check them out on Launchpad. We plan every 3 months. We have an online Ubuntu developer summit every 3 months, and everybody's welcome to join. Everything takes place in Google+. All of that work results in blueprints, which essentially feature definition documents with work items, with a mixture of engineers from Canonical as community members. All of that stuff is out in the public as well. I've already mentioned the quarterly planning meetings, but that's something that our community are welcome to join. The press can join, everybody can see what's going on. Fully open communication. Everything we do is out in the open. Public IRC channels, public mailing lists, all that kind of stuff. And importantly, we have daily images. So, one of the key things that we wanted to, one of the key values that we've always had in Ubuntu is that you can, I'm trying to think of the best way of describing this, but one of the things that I think has propelled Linux as an operating system is that everything is done out in the open and anybody can harness the technology at any one time. Like, we have the notion of releases. We have 13.04, 13.10, 14.04, 14.10. But in reality, those are the releases that we cut for end users. If somebody's a developer or somebody is an enthusiast and they want to check the system out, then they can install the development version of Ubuntu. Like on my laptop right now, this is running the currently unreleased version of Ubuntu, which is Ubuntu 13.10. Every day, I update this thing, and I get new packages that come in, new features that come in, and it provides me an opportunity where I can use it as my daily driver, I can test it, I can report bugs where I see them. But for that to happen, it requires a very, very firm commitment to what we call data quality. You know, if you've got 500 developers working on Ubuntu, using the development version of Ubuntu, and a bug comes in that means someone can't log in, that's 500 people who are completely screwed. So development machines are great as long as we can assure a certain level of quality. And we've spent quite a lot of effort over the years securing that around the desktop, to the point where I've been running Ubuntu as a development machine now for probably 4 or 5 years. And I've only ever had one issue. And that was a bug that slipped through our QA processes. So we thought we want to take this, but there is no reason why we can't apply that methodology to the phone and to the tablet. So right now you can take a device such as, on that one. So you can take a device such as, like this is a Google Nexus 4, well, sorry, LG Nexus 4. And we have a tool called Phantom Flash, and it will download the image for you, and it will flash your phone. And you can do that every day if you want to. So this provides a unique opportunity for our community who are enthusiastic about Ubuntu to be able to test each image every day as it's happening, and to provide that feedback to our developers. To the point whereby a number of us, we had a goal at the end of May for the phone to be what we call dog foodable ready by the end of the month. That is that we can use it as a data driver. You can use it as your own phone. You can make phone calls, you can send and receive text messages, you can get online with your mobile data connection, Wi-Fi networks work, all of that kind of stuff. And we hit that goal at the end of May. So many of us have been using it as our data driver. In fact, my Android phone broke, so I was pretty much forced into it. So anyway, so this is, you know, one of the key goals that we've always had here is that we want this to be as open as we've ever done it with Ubuntu. But the second thing here is that one of the things that we've heard repeatedly from some handset manufacturers and from some carriers as well, is that while Android is a great project in terms of a repository of code, it's sometimes difficult to collaborate there. And one of the things that we want to do is we want to make sure that our community is as accessible as anything else. That if you want to get a patch into Ubuntu, you can participate right away. We do not want to have 16 or 18 month waiting periods for you to get your code into Ubuntu. We formed the Carrier Advisory Group. There's a forum where our carriers can influence our community process. We have Verizon and T-Mobile and Deutsche Telekom and a bunch of other, there's 12 of them, who've joined this Carrier Advisory Group to provide input onto how we build Ubuntu. We don't want this relationship with carriers and handset manufacturers to be, we make the software, you put it on your device, off you go. You know, our community is a shared commons that we're all involved in. So I'm really proud of the fact that we've got this going. I think it's relatively unique in the cell phone world. And obviously, any of you are more than welcome to join us. A key piece of this earlier on that I mentioned was the core apps. So I think this is a good example, is when we announced the phone, we said, you know, we need to build this together. And we asked our community to participate, and we said, if you know QML, then come and join us, come and participate. And we had 1,500 people fill in the form on develop.ubuntu.com. Like I say, we got 200 or 300 of those folks. And what we did is, and Michael Hall, who's here, who's on my team, he spearheaded a lot of this work. We provided a lot of project management so the community teams didn't have to, so they could focus on coding. So we have these 12 apps: calendar, clock, calculator, Sudoku, stock ticker, a game called Drop-in Letters, RSS reader, terminal file manager, all those kinds of things. Weather app. And we have all 12 of those, well, the exception of 11 of those, are all in the daily image. Every line of code in those applications was written by our community. Every line of code was tracked and project managed. We have a burn down chart that tracks all of that work, and we're on schedule for having all of those apps ready by October. And to me, this was just a really phenomenal example of the Ubuntu community wrapping its mittens around a problem like delivering the phone. Here's an example of the clock and the weather app and how they're looking. And if you want to see demos of the models, we can show you. Now, a key piece of this as well was in building this kind of converged platform. It wasn't just building software that runs on a phone or a tablet or whatever else. It was all the pieces around the edge. And one of the issues that we had was application developers getting their content into Ubuntu. And to be brutally honest with you, it sucked beforehand. It was incredibly difficult for an application developer to get their app into Ubuntu. We had a process to do it, but we had some limitations in how it worked. So basically what would happen is a developer would create a Debian package, to send it to us, and then we had a community team that would review that package, and if it met certain quality requirements, it would go into the archive. And then download, like browsing apps and downloading them and installing them, that was all taken care of. The problem is that Debian packages run at root, and they have something called maintainer scripts, which means that arguably a package can do naughty things in a maintainer script, which meant that every package needed a full code review. And that's really time consuming for anybody, particularly for a group of volunteers. So what happened is people would upload their packages. We did an Ubuntu application showdown one time. We expected about 30 apps. We had 144 submitted, and it completely blocked everybody. It was a nightmare. So we started putting together a specification about fixing all this mess. And now what we have is we have a format called click packages, which you can generate from the SDK. So you write your application, you generate a click package, you can go to development.ubuntu.com, you can upload that package. We have full application sandboxing, so everything is protected. So an application could be evil. We actually have an app called Evil App that tries to do nasty things. And the application sandboxing protects the system against that. So now the review period for getting an application into the archive is about 10 minutes. It's not a full code review. Everything is protected. So there was a lot of work in doing this. A lot of this happened in the background. But this is not just about building a better phone OS, it's about building a better developer ecosystem as well. So one aspect was uploading the applications, but the other aspect here as well was making it easy for developers to write software. Like we've always had this philosophy in Ubuntu of technology should be free software and it should be easy to use. That's our philosophy across all of the different things we try to work on. And we felt that that needs to apply to developers as well. So if you want to write an application, and Michael Hall's going to be doing a workshop at 4 p.m. today, and I'd encourage you all to join him. But you can write an application using a few different frameworks. One is you can write a native app using QML, which is this awesome declarative markup language that's part of the Qt toolkit. The UI for all of this convergence is written in Qt using C++. But if you want to write a really neat, slick application, you can write it in QML. It's really easy to write apps using QML and to define custom interfaces and all kinds of stuff. The other thing is that HTML5 is a big thing. Firefox OS has banked on that. Our view is web apps are cool, but they don't feel as nice as native apps in many cases. But we also identify the fact that people want to write apps in HTML5. So we've taken that and we're providing a bunch of services around how you can integrate your apps into the system as well. I mentioned earlier on about online services, places like Gmail and Pandora and places like that. We have technology as part of our SDK that you can integrate a service on the client side. So for example, we have a sound indicator where you can always access what you're listening to and there's transport controls. You can integrate Pandora with that without having to modify Pandora's website, as an example. So we want to integrate all of these different pieces. So even though HTML5 and the online services piece are web-based, and at times they can feel a little less native, we've filled in the gaps around those pieces to make them feel native. We also support OpenGL, so if you've got a game and you want to run it, that's a no-brainer, it's easy to do. And then finally we have this concept called scopes. One of the things that we've noticed is that carriers are increasingly becoming content companies. And they may not deliver content themselves, but they may have partners who they want to deliver content from as well. So we've integrated content into the core of the phone itself. So and I'd encourage everyone to check out a demo from the booth, but when you open the phone up, you can switch between the home view and the videos and the apps and the photos and the music, and we can pull in content from lots of different sources. You don't have to load a music app to go and access your music. You don't have to load a software center to access your applications. You don't have to load a video app to find and browse videos. We don't have iTunes, right? We don't need that. This is our view. And the important thing about these scopes as well is they can search anything. So, as part of the phone, if you do a search in the home scope, it'll search Wikipedia and weather listings and Yelp and everything. It's all integrated into the phone instead of having this cacophony of different applications to find content. So we built all of this into our SDK. We built this brand new SDK that's based upon Qt and QML. But you can build all of these different, you can harness each of these different technologies from within the SDK. And if you're interested in checking this out, go to developer.ubuntu.com and you can find out some details about it. So our goal is, you know, like I say, I've been working here for a while and our goals are always ambitious. 1.0 of the phone by October. We've got a lot of work to do, but we're making clear and consistent progress in that goal. Like I say, many of us are running it as our daily phone. I'd encourage everybody to come and check out the demo. But we're making good progress to essentially have a 1.0. This will not be a beta, this will not be alpha software. This will be fully stable software that can be deployed to customers. So I want to talk a little bit about XDA, because, you know, I'm here. So when we announced Ubuntu for phones, we had just an explosion of interest from XDA. And I always had a kind of a tacit understanding of what XDA did, but I never really paid that much attention. And then someone created an Ubuntu Touch forum. Whoever created that forum, by the way, show yourself, because I want to buy you a drink at some point. And there was just there was like 1,000 posts on that forum within a week or something insane. 5 minutes? Okay. So so we saw this just explosion of interest, which was awesome. And since then, people have been porting Ubuntu to all of these different handsets. And we wanted to make this as easy as possible, because one of the challenges that we found was that people are working furiously to port Ubuntu Touch to a different type of handset. Officially we target Nexus 4 and Google Nexus devices, Galaxy Nexus devices. But there's no reason why someone can't run it on a different device. It's running on 45 different devices right now. But the challenge was, we want to make it as easy to get the content from the XDA community onto a device as we do for our 2 official devices. Because for our 2 official devices, we just say, Phablet Flash, and it does it all for you. So we've spent some time modifying Phablet Flash to be able to do that. You can go and see the list of devices that are currently, that the XDA community have ported it to on that page, wiki.ubuntu.com/touch/devices. And we've modified this tool so basically all said you can say Phablet Flash community and then -- device and then the vendor of the device. And then what that will do is that will pull in that port, it will download it, and it will automatically deploy it to your device. So if any of you worked on porting Ubuntu to another device, you can get all of your good stuff in the eyes of, in the hands of everybody. So somebody doesn't have to be an expert to be able to deploy it. If you want to port a device, if you want to work on it, it's really easy. So essentially what you do is you do the work of porting. We have documentation for how to port on the wiki. You create the port maintainers team, put it in Bazaar and Launchpad, create the JSON manifest file, and then test it with Phablet Flash. It's really, really easy to get your port in the hands of people. And again, wiki.ubuntu.com/touch/making ports available is where you can find the details. Now, Oppo. Oppo are very cool. We were talking earlier on, so we have a little competition. Does anyone want to win an Oppo phone? All right, so this is what we're going to do. So I was having a conversation with one of the Oppo folks earlier on. We were saying, like, it would be cool if Ubuntu Touch ran on this. And Ubuntu Touch runs on an Android kernel, so a lot of the work has been done already. So we have a competition. If somebody can port Ubuntu Touch to this device this weekend, they get to keep this phone. So if anyone's interested in volunteering for that, the man here, Mike, go and talk to him, and he will hook you up. So what we want to do is, if you can get Ubuntu Touch running on this thing, so you can use it on a daily basis, and much of that work has been done already, then this phone is going to be yours. And not only that, but it means that Ubuntu Touch will run on everybody else's Oppo phone, of which Oppo phones seem pretty popular right now. So anyone interested in taking part? Yeah? That guy? That guy? All right, excellent. I want to take a minute just to talk about Ubuntu Edge. We've got this Ubuntu Indiegogo campaign going right now to raise $32 million to build a device that will dual boot Ubuntu and Android, and then when you plug a monitor into it, it will boot a full Ubuntu desktop. It's called the Ubuntu Edge. The specs are pretty meaty when you look at it: 4 gig of RAM, 128 gigs of disk space, sapphire glass, all the bells and whistles that you're going to need. We haven't defined a CPU yet because we want to choose that close to the time so we can pick the fastest processor on the market. We're at $9.3 million. We've already broken 2 of the 3 crowdsourcing records in history. So the third one is to get over 10.2. So that's our next step. But if any of you are interested in supporting the campaign, I recommend you go here, ig.com/@/Ubuntu Edge. And then finally, just one final point that I'm going to get off. Mike's doing his app development workshop at 4 p.m. in here. I'd encourage you all to come along. He's going to talk about the app developer program, as well as some of the technology that's involved in there. Mike actually wrote an app for Ubuntu Touch that talks to the XDA forums. It's like a client for the XDA forums that he's going to walk through. The other thing is that we have an Ubuntu app showdown going on right now, where if you write an application for Ubuntu Touch in the next 6 weeks, you can win a Nexus 4 device with your app pre-installed on it, with Ubuntu Touch on it, and with the ability to get your application in the default Ubuntu image that will go on millions of handsets. So I'd really encourage you to check that out, developer.ubuntu.com/showdown. And I think I'm out of time. Q&A? Any questions?
On Android, there's a nice architecture for applications to interoperate. For example, if I have a barcode scanner installed and I go price search application, that one can use with this intent setup, with the intents, the other application, and the content file, everything. It's much easy to do a plugin architecture and so on. Is there some plan to do something similar in Ubuntu?
Yeah, that's going to be landing by the end of the month. That's what we have these, what we call these 5 rocks, things that we need by the end of August, ready in our road towards October. One of the pieces is how applications talk to each other, as well as the application lifecycle story about how apps start, stop, and resume state, and things like that. So that will be there.
Thank you.
I've got 3 quick questions.
Yeah.
You mentioned you were trying to maximize workable space on the screen. Have you considered a receiving taskbar based on certain working conditions, so that way you could, again, use that additional space?
Sorry, receiving what?
A receiving taskbar,
What do you mean?
notification bar at the top, everybody's got notifications.
Oh.
What if when you're not needing it? You just
Yeah, the one thing that
select
wasn't
something?
clear in the image that I have there is that we actually already have that. So for example, the gallery app is an example, they'll hide that.
Okay.
And different applications can request when that comes out, or they can request to hide it. But then you can override it when you slide out from the top edge.
What was the bug that slipped through? You said you had 1 bug experience.
Oh, for me?
Yeah.
There was an issue a while back where someone uploaded a package that basically completely screwed up the dependency chain, and X was removed. So I started my machine and nothing started, and I noticed that there was no X server. That was the bug. And it screwed me up for about an hour.
And lastly, what measures have you put into place to support parallel development with the Android applications? Why not develop both at the same time if you're launching a new app?
So one of the goals that we've got is to make porting applications really easy, so people can. What we'd like to do is where somebody's writing an Android app, and they're writing it in Eclipse, and then they can quite easily test it on an Ubuntu Touch device or in an Ubuntu Touch emulator. So one of the things that we're looking at doing is doing the work to integrate that into Eclipse. We haven't done it yet, because our theory is that people will write essentially a library that does the back-end functionality, and then you can just layer on the Android UI or the Ubuntu Touch UI. But we appreciate the fact that we need to do that in the Android toolchain, not do the Android piece in the Ubuntu toolchain. So that work is planned, but it's not currently complete.
So it sounded like you're saying that you're using Qt as the underlying graphics toolkit for the phone. Are you guys switching the desktop over, and when is that happening?
Yeah, so Qt has been supported on the desktop for a while. A little bit of context for everybody else. Most of the applications we've got on the desktop are written using the toolkit called GTK. We now recommend, like all of the development that we do is using Qt QML, and we're recommending new application development. So the application developer showdown that I was talking about, where you can win a Nexus, we're asking people to use the SDK that Mike's going to cover it for as well. We're not stopping people being able to run GTK apps as an example, but I think just will naturally end up being rewritten and replaced by QApps.
Just a clarification, I was wondering what version of OpenGL would you be running? OpenGL ES 2.0, I presume?
So, it's a good question. I don't know specifically. So we're on the phone, we're focusing on OpenGL ES. We're building a new display server called Mir that can support full OpenGL. I'm not sure of because like a lot of gaming, like a good example is Valve. They've got like 150 games that depend on GL. So we need to provide that kind of support. I don't know the specific versions. Sorry to answer.
For somebody who's writing JavaScript applications, and they have access to all these various hundreds of packages out on the internet of JavaScript libraries, you've got an HTML and a QML. Do both of those support these libraries?
Yes.
Natively, so that you can just knock out some UI pretty freaking amazingly fast.
Yeah, exactly. The thing that's neat as well is that when you write a HTML5 app in Ubuntu, you can use the same theming, so it looks like an actual proper Ubuntu app as opposed to, a web app parading on a device.
I know you said October was your 1.0 deadline. Does that include CDMA support, or what's your timeline for bringing in CDMA support?
So right now, CDMA is not on the roadmap for 1.0. So just to be clear about the 1.0 thing in October, that's when we want to consider trunk is going to be tagged as 1.0, essentially. So that doesn't mean you can go into a T-Mobile store and buy a handset with Ubuntu on it. That will come later. In terms of CDMA, that's not currently on the roadmap for October, although Verizon have joined the Cairo Advisory Group, so that may be reprioritized. And I think that's all the questions. Thank you, everybody.